The security deposit for our canceled honeymoon suite in Bali had just been refunded when I found the photo. There he was, Daniel, on a Miami Beach Instagram post from yesterday. Sun-kissed, smiling, with his arm around a beautiful woman and two identical little girls in matching sundresses. The caption made my stomach turn. Family Beach Day. 3 years of marriage, 2 perfect daughters, 1 amazing husband. #blessed. I stared at my phone until the screen went dark, then looked at my own wedding ring. Still shiny, still new, still a joke. Mrs. Harrison. The bank manager's voice snapped me back to reality. As I was saying, the transfers from your trust fund were all authorized with your signature. All perfectly legal. Of course they were. I'd signed everything willingly, high on love and wedding champagne. $2 million transferred to our joint investment account the morning after the wedding. The same morning Daniel kissed me goodbye, said he needed to grab coffee, and vanished. And there's no way to trace where the money went. The manager's sympathetic look said it all. The funds were moved through several offshore accounts within hours of the transfer. I'm sorry. I wasn't the only one looking for Daniel. His parents, Richard and Diana Harrison, Boston's elite philanthropist couple, had hired private investigators, or so they claimed. Sweetheart, Diana's voice dripped concern through my phone later that day. Daniel just needs time. The wedding was overwhelming. He's always been sensitive. I watched the Instagram video again. Daniel didn't look overwhelmed as he built sandcastles with his daughters. He looked practiced. Comfortable, like a man who'd been playing this role for years. Diana, I kept my voice steady. When did Daniel last live in Miami? A pause. Too long. Miami? Never, darling. He's always been in Boston. Another lie. I'd spent 2 weeks tracking his digital breadcrumbs. Daniel Harrison had lived many lives in many cities, always with access to wealthy women's bank accounts. Really? Because I'm looking at his Miami Beach house right now. I pulled up the property records I found. Purchased 3 years ago. Joint ownership with Elena Montoya Harrison. The sharp intake of breath was all I needed to hear. They'd known. All along they'd known. Catherine dear, I can explain. Save it. I ended the call and opened my laptop where dozens of tabs told the story I pieced together. Daniel Harrison, or Daniel Cooper, or Daniel Wells. The names change, but the pattern stayed the same. Wealthy families, whirlwind romances, quick marriages, vanishing acts. He'd done this before, many times. But he'd slipped up this time. Getting sloppy, maybe, or overconfident. The Miami life seemed real, settled. Like maybe he finally found a con he wanted to stick with. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard Harrison. Please don't do anything rash. Come to the house. We need to talk. I looked at my wedding photo, taken just 16 days ago. Daniel's parents flanking us, all smiles and champagne toasts. All lies. The Harrison mansion looked exactly as it had on my wedding day, when we'd taken photos in the manicured gardens. Diana opened the door herself, pearls and perfect makeup in place. Catherine, please. How long have you known? I walked past her into their study, where Richard stood by the fireplace. About Elena? About the others? Richard's hands shook slightly as he poured himself a scotch. It's complicated. Try me. Daniel has difficulties. Diana perched on the edge of a leather chair. He needs help. We've tried. He's a con man. I cut her off. And you've been helping him. The silence confirmed it. How many? I demanded. How many women has he married? Stolen from? Richard sat heavily. You don't understand. His condition. His condition. I pulled out my phone, showing them the files I gathered. You mean his pattern of marrying wealthy women, draining their accounts and disappearing. That condition. Diana began to cry. Perfect, practiced tears. We just wanted to protect him. By letting him destroy lives. By watching him steal my trust fund. We'll pay you back, Richard said quickly. Every penny. Just don't go public. I laughed. You think this is about money? What do you want then? I showed them the Instagram post. I want you to explain to Elena and those little girls why you let your son build a life of lies. I want you to face every woman he's done this to. You can't prove anything, Richard's voice hardened. Actually, I can. I opened my briefcase. Before I was your son's mark, I was a financial crimes prosecutor. Did Daniel know that? Did you? The color drained from their faces. 8 women in 5 years, I continued. All with similar stories, all with evidence. And now, thanks to your family's stellar reputation, I have their attention. My phone buzzed, a message from Elena Montoya Harrison herself. Got your email. We need to talk. I showed them the message. Seems like your daughter-in-law is interested in comparing notes. Those children, Diana whispered. Our granddaughters. Who Daniel abandoned this morning, right after I sent Elena the proof. I stood up. He's running again. But this time we're ready. Richard reached for his phone. I'll call him. Don't bother. The FBI is tracking his phone. Turn on the news. On their massive TV, breaking news showed Daniel being escorted off a plane in Chicago, his next planned hunting ground, according to the ticket on his fake passport. You helped him hurt people, I said quietly. You covered for him, funded him, gave him credibility. And now you get to watch it all fall apart. Diana's tears had stopped. You'll destroy our family. No, I corrected her. Daniel destroyed families. I'm just making sure he can't do it again. My phone lit up with messages from the other women. Years of victims finally connecting, finally understanding they weren't alone. One last thing. I paused at the door. Elena's flying in tomorrow with the girls. She thinks they deserve to meet their grandparents, the real ones, not the ones who helped their father con and abandoned women across the country. I left them there, surrounded by their wealth and lies, and stepped into the summer evening. My wedding ring caught the light, and I finally slipped it off. Sometimes justice wears a designer dress and carries a trust fund. Sometimes the biggest cons aren't about money at all, but about the families who enable them. And sometimes they pick the wrong mark entirely. Elena Montoya Harrison was exactly what you'd expect from her Instagram aesthetic. Polished, poised, and absolutely furious. She sat across from me at my lawyer's office, her twins asleep in a double stroller beside her. 3 years, she said, turning her own wedding ring. 3 years of marriage, and I never knew he had 6 other wives before me. 7, counting you. 8, I corrected, sliding over a new file. Found another one this morning. Seattle, 2019. He was Daniel Peterson then. Elena's hands shook as she looked at the photos. The same smile. The same lines about family and forever. God, we were all so stupid. We weren't stupid. We were targeted. I showed her my research board, faces and timelines connected with red string. He studied us. Learned our weaknesses. Your art gallery, my trust fund, Sarah's inheritance in Seattle. And his parents helped. Elena's voice cracked. They came to our wedding. Held my daughters when they were born. They covered his tracks. Gave him legitimacy. The perfect Boston family backing up his stories. My phone buzzed, a text from the FBI agent handling the case. Harrison talking, wants a deal. Elena saw the message. What kind of deal could possibly make this right? The kind where he gives up everyone involved, including Daddy's offshore accounts that funded his cons. The conference room door opened, and Sarah Chen from Seattle walked in. Another victim, another life disrupted. We'd been coordinating for days, building our case stronger. They've frozen the Chicago accounts, Sarah had announced, sitting down. Found another $2 million there. Probably from Catherine's trust fund. Elena studied Sarah's face. How long were you? 6 months, 2019. He was a tech entrepreneur then. Sarah laughed bitterly. Left me at our reception, said he needed air. Took $3 million from my family's company. My phone lit up again, a news alert. The Harrison parents were being questioned by federal authorities. Their perfect facade was cracking. The twins, Elena whispered, looking at her sleeping daughters. What do I tell them when they're older? The truth, I said firmly, that their father was a predator, but their mother was strong enough to protect them. Sarah opened her laptop, showing us surveillance photos. He had a pattern. Always the same type of woman, successful, independent, with access to family money. Always the same timing, disappeared within 24 hours of getting access to funds. Until Elena, I noted. He stayed with you. Built a life. Elena wiped away tears. Because I didn't give him access to my gallery's accounts. My father insisted on keeping business separate from marriage. Daniel kept trying, kept making excuses about why we should combine finances. So he found me instead, I finished. used his business trips to set up his next con while maintaining his Miami family man facade. My phone rang. Diana Harrison. I put it on speaker. Catherine, please, she sounded broken. You have to understand. We thought we were helping him. By funding his cons. Elena snapped. By watching him destroy lives. He's sick. He needs help. He's a sociopath. Sarah cut in. And you enabled him for years. I ended the call as another message came through. Daniel wanted to meet, to explain. Are we doing this? Sarah asked. Elena straightened her spine. All of us. Together. The federal building was cold, impersonal. Perfect for confronting the man who'd married 8 women in 5 years. Daniel sat in the interview room, still handsome, still trying to charm. Ladies, he smiled sadly, I suppose I owe you all an explanation. Save it. I laid out photos of all 8 weddings. We know everything. The cons, the patterns, your parents' involvement. My parents? He laughed. They were clueless. Just rich idiots trying to protect their son. Elena stepped forward. Liar. They knew about me, about our daughters. Something flickered in Daniel's eyes. The girls, they're not. They're yours. Elena's voice was steel. And they'll grow up knowing exactly who their father is. Sarah opened her files. 8 marriages, $15 million stolen. Multiple identities. And now, evidence of your parents laundering money through their charitable foundation. Daniel's facade cracked slightly. You can't prove. Actually, I smiled. We can. Your father's talking to the FBI right now. Seems the Harrison family loyalty only goes so far. What do you want? Everything, Elena said. Every account, every name, every person who helped you. And Sarah added, you're going to face every woman you conned. In court. In public. Daniel leaned back. You know what's funny? Catherine was supposed to be my last one. Retire with the trust fund, settle down. With your wife and daughters in Miami? I raised an eyebrow. They were just part of the long game. Elena's gallery, the real money was there. Elena's face went white. I grabbed her hand under the table. 3 years, she whispered. 3 years of lying to my face. Business is business, Daniel shrugged. Nothing personal. My phone buzzed. Richard Harrison had finished his FBI interview. The evidence was damning. Decades of fraud, all to fund his son's cons. Here's what's going to happen. I laid out photos of the twins. You're going to sign away all parental rights. You're going to return every dollar you stole. And you're going to watch as your perfect family name becomes synonymous with fraud. Or we let the other victims handle it their way. Sarah smiled grimly. The ones with less legal methods in mind. Daniel studied our faces, the prosecutor, the gallery owner, the tech executive. 3 of the women he'd underestimated. My parents are being arrested as we speak. I showed him the live news footage. Seems their charity was less about helping people and more about hiding money. Elena stood up. I want you to remember something. Every time you sit in your cell, every time you think about your daughters, you didn't just steal money. You stole years of our lives, memories, trust. And now, Daniel actually looked scared. Now he get to watch as we rebuild. Together. Stronger. Sarah gathered her files. Your victims aren't hiding anymore. We're not ashamed. We're angry. I left my wedding ring on the table. 8 wives, 8 stories, 1 really public trial. Outside, reporters waited. 8 women had become international news, the Black Widow wives, they called us. But we were done being victims. Ready? I asked Elena and Sarah. Elena adjusted her sleeping daughters in their stroller, ready to show them what strong women do when con men pick the wrong targets. Sarah linked arms with us, ready to take back our narratives. Together, we faced the cameras. Because sometimes justice comes from unexpected alliances. Sometimes healing comes from standing together. And sometimes, the perfect con falls apart because he forgot one simple rule. Never underestimate a woman scorned, especially not 8 of them. 6 months later, the courthouse steps were packed with reporters as the verdict came down. Daniel Harrison was sentenced to 25 years for fraud, money laundering, and multiple counts of grand theft. His parents received 15 years each for their role in the scheme. But the real story wasn't in the sentencing, it was in what came after. Elena's art gallery had become a sanctuary of sorts. Tonight, it showcased a special exhibition, Con of Love, 8 Brides Stories. Each of us contributed our narrative, turning pain into power. My wedding dress hummed like a ghost in one installation, trust fund statements shredded into a paper cascade around it. Sarah's section featured surveillance photos showing Daniel's different identities across cities. Elena's space was the most powerful, her twins' baby shoes next to their father's multiple wedding rings. The New York Times piece is out, Sarah announced, showing us her phone. They're calling us the Sisterhood of Survival. Elena adjusted one of her photographs. Any word from the other victims coming forward? 3 more confirmed. I checked my messages. Daniel was busy in Europe before he hit the US. Interpol's involved now. The gallery filled with supporters, journalists, and advocates for fraud victims. What had started as our personal justice had become a movement. Ladies, our lawyer called out. The Harrison estate settlement just came through. We gathered around her tablet. The numbers were staggering. Not just our stolen money returned, but the entire Harrison fortune, distributed among all victims. The foundation's legitimate charities will keep operating, she explained, but under new management, your management. Elena's eyes welled up. We can help other victims. Already are. Sarah pointed to a young woman entering the gallery. That's Jessica, Daniel's London wife from 2018. She's starting a support network. The exhibition had become more than art. It was a beacon for others who'd been conned, a way to say they weren't alone. My phone buzzed with a message from Daniel's cell block. I underestimated you. All of you. Still trying to have the last word, Elena read over my shoulder, her twins playing nearby with Sarah's daughter from her new marriage. Let him, I smiled. We've got better things to focus on. The Harrison Family Foundation had been renamed the Phoenix Fund, helping victims of romance fraud rebuild their lives. Sarah ran the tech side, tracking digital fraud patterns. Elena's gallery hosted support group meetings, and I had left prosecution to defend fraud victims full-time. Sometimes I wonder, Elena watched her daughters coloring in the corner. What will tell them when they're older about their father? We'll tell them about strength, Sarah said firmly, about women who turned victimhood into victory. And about family, I added, watching our growing circle of survivors connect across the gallery. The kind you choose, not the kind that cons you. My phone lit up with another alert. Daniel's parents had lost their final appeal. The Harrison empire was officially gone. But something better had risen from its ashes. 8 women who'd never meant to find each other had built something stronger than any con. Truth, support, and genuine connection. Next exhibit, Elena asked, already planning ahead. Hope, I decided. We show them hope. Because that's what we become, not just survivors or victims or ex-wives. We were proof that even the darkest cons couldn't break the human spirit, that women who were meant to be broken could become unbreakable together. The twins ran up, showing us their drawings, 8 stick figures holding hands in a circle. Family, reimagined through innocent eyes. Perfect, Elena hugged them close. That's exactly what we are. Outside the sunset on Boston's skyline. Somewhere in a prison cell, Daniel Harrison was beginning to understand what his greatest con had actually created. An unshakable sisterhood of the women he tried to destroy. But we weren't thinking about him anymore. We were too busy building something new, something real, something that no con man could ever take away. Because sometimes the happy ending isn't about romance at all. Sometimes it's about finding your true family in the aftermath of lies. And sometimes the greatest love story is the one where women lift each other up, turning scars into strength and pain into purpose. The exhibition lights dimmed, spotlighting 8 wedding dresses, now symbols not of deception, but of rebirth. 8 stories, 1 truth, and a future built on helping others find their way back to trust. The sting of the slap echoed through the luxurious ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton, silencing the chatter of Boston's corporate elite. My champagne glass shattered on the marble floor, crystal mixing with ice in a perfect metaphor for my shattered illusions about David Harrison, my fiancé of 8 months. Know your place, he hissed, grabbing my wrist tight enough to leave marks. I told you not to mention the promotion tonight. 300 pairs of eyes watched us, but no one moved to help. In the world of Morrison and Reed investment banking, domestic violence was just another inconvenient scene at a corporate event, something to be whispered about over martinis, then conveniently forgotten. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat of the impact. 6 months ago, David had been a mid-level investment banker. Now he was the youngest vice president in the firm's history, and apparently, that power had gone to his head. David, Charles Morrison, the CEO, called out with forced joviality. "Perhaps you and Emma should step outside for a moment." David's grip on my wrist tightened. "No need, sir. Emma was just leaving. Too much champagne, you understand." I caught Sandra Morrison's eye across the room. The CEO's wife quickly looked away, but not before I saw the guilt flash across her face. She knew exactly why I had mentioned David's promotion tonight. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room, "I think I'll stay. We haven't even gotten to the interesting part of the evening yet." David's face darkened. "Emma, don't." "What's wrong, darling?" I smiled, pulling free of his grip. "Afraid I might mention the late-night meetings in the Seaport Hotel? Or the offshore account that mysteriously gained $1 million the day before your promotion was announced?" The color drained from his face. Sandra Morrison nearly dropped her drink. 2 weeks ago, I hadn't meant to discover anything. As a forensic accountant at a rival firm, numbers were my life. But I never expected to find financial irregularities while helping David with his taxes. One suspicious transaction led to another, and soon I'd uncovered a web of corruption that went straight to the top. "You're drunk," David announced loudly, trying to grab my arm again. "Let me call you a car." I sidestepped his grasp. Interesting choice of words. Like the ones you used in your emails to Sandra. I turned to Charles Morrison. "Your wife has quite the talent for negotiation, doesn't she, Mr. Morrison? Trading certain intimate favors for certain professional advantages." The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Sandra Morrison went pale, while her husband's face turned an alarming shade of red. "Security," David barked, "remove her immediately." "Oh, please do," I smiled, pulling out my phone. I'm sure the SEC would love to hear why I was forcibly removed after mentioning financial irregularities at a publicly traded company. Charles Morrison raised his hand, stopping the approaching security guards. "Miss Walker, perhaps we should discuss this in my office." "Let's discuss it right here," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Let's talk about how David suddenly had the money to buy that Beacon Hill townhouse. Or how certain trades were backdated to maximize profits. Or maybe," I turned to face the crowd of banking executives, "we should discuss the systematic fraud that's been happening under everyone's noses." David lunged forward, his hand raised for another slap. But this time I was ready. I stepped back, watching him stumble. "Touch me again," I said quietly, "and the FBI gets everything." "You're bluffing," he snarled. "You've got nothing." I opened my phone's gallery, projecting it onto the massive screen behind the stage where the band had been playing. Emails, bank statements, hotel receipts, and surveillance photos filled the display. 4 months of evidence say otherwise. Did you really think I wouldn't investigate when you suddenly had millions? I'm a forensic accountant, David. Numbers are literally my job. Sandra Morrison was already heading for the exit, but 2 men in suits blocked her path. They weren't hotel security. That evening, one of them announced, showing his badge. "FBI, Financial Crimes Division. We'd appreciate it if everyone stayed put for a few minutes." David's swagger finally cracked. "Emma, baby, we can talk about this. Like we talked about it when you slapped me. Or like we talked about it when you threatened to ruin my career if I didn't stay quiet." I touched my cheek again, using the pain to fuel my resolve. "The time for talking is over." More FBI agents entered the ballroom, moving purposefully toward specific executives. My anonymous tip had named names, provided proof, and exposed a fraud scheme worth hundreds of millions. "You stupid bitch," David spat, all pretense of civility gone. "You have no idea what you've done." I smiled, the same confident smile he'd given me when proposing with a ring I now knew was bought with stolen money. "Actually, I know exactly what I've done. I've gotten justice." Charles Morrison was already speaking frantically with his lawyers in the corner. Sandra had sunk into a chair, mascara running as she realized her perfect world was crumbling. And David stared at me with pure hatred, finally showing his true face. "Miss Walker," an FBI agent approached, "we'll need your official statement." I nodded, reaching up to unclasp the expensive necklace David had given me last week. "Of course, and I have more documentation at home." Amazing what you can find when your fiancé thinks you're just the pretty girl who's good with spreadsheets. As the agents began reading rights and making arrests, I walked toward the ballroom exit. The same banking executives who'd watched David slap me now stared in shocked silence as their colleagues were led away in handcuffs. My phone buzzed. A message from my boss. Saw the news breaking. Your job is safe. In fact, how do you feel about a promotion? I stepped into the cool Boston night, hearing the chaos continue behind me. Tomorrow, the financial world would be rocked by scandal. Careers would end, reputations would shatter, and one of Boston's most prestigious firms would face serious questions. But tonight, I touched my bruised cheek and smiled. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just exposing the truth, it's making sure everyone pays for their sins. David's voice carried from the ballroom. Emma, you've ruined everything. I turned back one last time. No, David, you did that the moment you thought you could hit me and get away with it. The morning after the gala, Boston's financial district was in chaos. I sat in my firm's conference room, watching multiple news channels cover the scandal. David's face was plastered across every screen, along with headlines screaming about fraud, corruption, and illicit affairs. Morrison and Reed, VP, arrested in million-dollar fraud scheme. FBI raids top investment firm following whistleblower tip. Power, money, and sex. The downfall of Boston's banking elite. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. Most calls were from reporters, but some were from other women, employees at Morrison and Reed who'd suffered similar abuse but had been too afraid to speak up. Miss Walker, my assistant, poked her head in. The FBI agents are here for your formal statement, and your ex-fiance's mother is in the lobby. Eleanor Harrison, Boston's self-proclaimed social queen and David's biggest enabler. Of course she'd come for damage control. Send in the FBI first, I said, touching my still bruised cheek. Mrs. Harrison can wait. 2 agents entered, the same ones from last night. Agent Carter, the lead investigator, sat down across from me. The evidence you provided is incredible, but we need to know, how long have you been gathering it? I opened my laptop, pulling up encrypted files. It started 4 months ago. David asked me to help with some tax documentation. That's when I noticed the first discrepancy. I showed them the timeline I created. Suspicious transfers, backdated trades, mysterious deposits that coincided with Sandra Morrison's hotel visits. What had started as one questionable transaction had led to a massive web of corruption. And the physical abuse? Agent Carter asked gently. Started small, grabbing my arm too hard, playful pushes that weren't playful. Last night wasn't the first slap, just the first public one. I pulled up security footage from David's office. He didn't know I had access to the building's cameras. The footage showed multiple instances of David's violence, throwing things, slamming me against walls, verbal abuse that made the agents wince. Why didn't he report it sooner? Because I needed everything, the fraud, the abuse, the whole corrupt system. If I only exposed the domestic violence, they would have buried it. Rich men's fiancés have accidents all the time in this world. A commotion outside interrupted us. Eleanor Harrison's voice carried through the glass walls. Do you know who I am? That little gold digger in there destroyed my son's life. I smiled grimly, right on cue. Agent Carter raised an eyebrow. You were expecting this. Mrs. Harrison's about to discover that her family's old money isn't so clean either. I handed him another flash drive. The Harrisons have been helping launder money through their charitable foundation for years. David learned his trick somewhere. The agents exchanged looks. This case was getting bigger by the minute. Eleanor burst in, her designer suit immaculate despite her rage. You vindictive little. Mrs. Harrison. I cut her off. Perfect timing. We were just discussing the Harrison Family Foundation's interesting banking practices. She froze. What are you talking about? I projected spreadsheets onto the conference room screen. 15 years of suspicious donations, shell companies, offshore accounts. Did you really think nobody would notice the pattern? You're lying, she hissed, but her perfectly maintained facade cracked slightly. Numbers don't lie, Eleanor, but you do. Like when you helped David hide his first assault charge 3 years ago. The girlfriend before me? The one who mysteriously moved to Europe. Eleanor's face went pale. Agent Carter leaned forward, suddenly very interested. She didn't move. I continued. She's in Providence and she's very interested in testifying. Amazing what people will share when someone finally listens. A text lit up my phone from Sandra Morrison's private number. I'll tell them everything. About David, Charles, all of it. You were right, it has to stop. I showed the message to Agent Carter. Looks like you'll have another witness. Eleanor sank into a chair, her aristocratic posture finally breaking. You have no idea what you've done to this family. Actually, I do. I'm preventing you from hurting anyone else. I stood up, gathering my files. Your son hit the wrong woman this time. One who knows how to follow the money. Security arrived to escort Eleanor out. Through the glass walls, I could see reporters gathering in the lobby. The story was getting bigger by the hour. My boss appeared in the doorway. Emma, the board wants to see you. They're creating a new division, corporate fraud investigation. They want you to head it. I nodded, but my phone buzzed again. David's name appeared on the screen, calling from central booking. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something made me answer on speaker. You think you've won? His voice was cold, controlled. When I get out. You won't. I interrupted. The evidence isn't just about money anymore, David. Every woman you've hurt, every person you've threatened, they're all coming forward. And guess what? Rich boys don't do well in federal prison. I made you, he snarled. You were nothing before me. I laughed, actually laughed. No, David. I was a forensic accountant before you. Now I'm the whistleblower who brought down Morrison and Reed. And tomorrow, I'll be the woman who helps other victims expose men like you. Agent Carter nodded approvingly as I hung up. We'll need you to testify when this goes to trial. I'll be there, I promised, with spreadsheets and surveillance footage gift-wrapped for the prosecution. Through my office window, I could see the Morrison and Reed building across the street. FBI agents were still going in and out, carrying boxes of evidence. The empire of corruption was crumbling, and from its ashes, something better might rise. My assistant appeared again. Emma, there's a group of women here, former Morrison and Reed employees. They say they have stories to tell. I thought about my bruised cheek, about David's rage, about Eleanor's threats. Then I thought about every woman who'd been silenced by money and power. Send them in, I said. It's time for everyone's stories to be heard. Agent Carter gathered his files. We'll be in touch about the trial. I touched my engagement ring, still on my finger. One last piece of evidence for you. I handed it over. The certification shows it's real, but I had it tested. It's fake, just like everything else about David Harrison. As the agents left, I watched more reporters arrive outside. The story would dominate headlines for weeks. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered were the women waiting to speak, the truth waiting to be told, and the system that needed to change. Sometimes justice needs more than evidence. Sometimes it needs someone willing to stand up, even with a bruised face and a broken heart, and say enough. 1 year later, I stood in the federal courthouse, watching David Harrison being led away in handcuffs. 15 years for fraud, money laundering, and witness intimidation. The domestic violence charges had been the final nails in his coffin. 5 women had ultimately testified about his abuse. Sandra Morrison had turned state's evidence, bringing down her husband and half the executive board with her testimony. The Harrison Family Foundation was under federal investigation, and Eleanor Harrison had fled to Switzerland, though Interpol was closing in. Ms. Walker? A young woman approached me outside the courtroom. I'm Jessica from Morrison and Reed. Well, what used to be Morrison and Reed? I wanted to thank you. The firm had been reorganized, renamed, and rebuilt from the ground up. My new corporate fraud investigation division had helped with the transformation, implementing systems to prevent future abuse of power, both financial and personal. How's the new management treating everyone? I asked, knowing the answer but wanting to hear it from her. She smiled. Different world. No more harassment, no more threats. We actually had a female CEO appointed last month. My phone buzzed, another message from the support network we created for survivors of corporate abuse. What had started as a small group of Morrison and Reed victims had grown into a national organization, helping women navigate both the professional and personal aftermath of workplace abuse. The next support group meeting is tonight, I told Jessica. You should come. Back in my office, I found a small package waiting on my desk. Inside was my old engagement ring, released from evidence now that the trial was over. A note from Agent Carter accompanied it. Thought you might want this back. Turns out it wasn't fake after all, just like your courage. Carter. I slipped the ring into an envelope addressed to a women's shelter. They could sell it and put the money to good use. My assistant knocked on the door. Your 3 o'clock is here, the whistleblower from Goldman Stanley. Send her in. I'd made it my mission to help other women expose corporate corruption. Every case was different, but the pattern was always the same. Power, abuse, silence. A nervous-looking woman entered, clutching a folder. I recognized the look in her eyes. I'd seen it in my own mirror a year ago. Tell me everything, I said gently. And remember, you're not alone anymore. As she began her story, I glanced at the newspaper on my desk. The headline read, Corporate Abuse Whistleblower Launches National Support Network. Below was a picture of me outside the courthouse, surrounded by the women who'd testified against David. My cheek had long since healed, but I never forgot the sting of that slap. It had become a reminder, not of victimhood, but of victory. Every case we handled, every corrupt executive we exposed, every woman we helped was another step toward changing the system. My phone lit up with a final text from David's prison number. I still own you. I smiled, typing back, no, you just taught me how to own myself. Then I blocked his number forever and turned back to the woman in front of me, ready to help her find her own voice, her own strength, her own justice. The late afternoon sun streamed through my office window, illuminating the wall where I'd hung a simple framed spreadsheet, the first piece of evidence I gathered against David. Below it was a quote I'd added after the trial. The truth is in the numbers, but the strength is in standing up. I touched my cheek one last time, feeling not the phantom pain of that slap, but the strength that had grown from it. David had wanted to silence me, control me, own me. Instead, he'd helped create something he never intended, a movement that would ensure no other woman had to stand alone against power and abuse. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just winning your case, it's helping others win theirs too. The woman across from me finished her story, looking uncertain. Can you help me? I opened my laptop, ready to start tracking numbers, gathering evidence, building another case. Yes, I said, thinking of all the women who'd sat in that same chair over the past year. We can help you, and then you'll help someone else. Because that's how change happens. One spreadsheet, one story, one brave voice at a time. I should have known something was wrong when James insisted on having our engagement party at his mother's estate. In the 8 months we'd been together, Victoria Matthews had made it crystal clear that I wasn't the kind of woman she'd envisioned for her surgeon's son. Old money doesn't mix with scholarship students, dear, she told me during our first meeting, examining my H&M dress as if it were contaminated. But James had been different. He defended me, loved me for my ambition, and promised that his mother's opinion didn't matter. That should have been my first red flag. No one from the Matthews family ever went against Victoria's wishes. The engagement party was everything you'd expect from Boston's elite. Champagne that cost more than my monthly rent, ice sculptures that probably cost more than my car, and guests who casually discussed their summer homes in the Hamptons. I stood in my carefully chosen dress, the most expensive thing I'd ever owned, feeling like an imposter. Olivia, darling, Victoria's voice cut through my thoughts. She was wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than my entire education. Could we speak privately in the study? There are some family matters to discuss. James squeezed my hand. Go ahead, honey. Mom probably wants to give you the family pearls or something. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. I followed Victoria through the maze of corridors in their mansion, my heels clicking against the marble floors. The study was exactly what you'd expect. Leather-bound books, an antique desk, and oil paintings of stern-looking Matthews ancestors judging me from their frames. Victoria closed the door and moved to the desk, pulling out a thick envelope. I'll make this simple, dear. Sign these papers now, and I'll give you $500,000 to walk away quietly. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Divorce papers. Already filled out, dated 6 months in the future. What is this? Insurance, Victoria smiled, the same cold smile I'd seen her give the household staff. You see, I had you investigated. Full background check. Your mother's gambling debts, your father's drinking problem. That scholarship you only got because your essay made the dean cry. Do you really think you belong in our world? The room seemed to spin. Does James know about this? Victoria's laugh was like ice cracking. Oh, sweetheart. Who do you think suggested it? My heart stopped. You're lying. Am I? She slid her phone across the desk. Text messages from James lit up the screen. Mom, make sure she signs. Use whatever leverage you need. The trust fund depends on this marriage looking legitimate for at least 6 months. Don't worry, she's desperate enough to take the money. My entire world crumbled as I read message after message. The perfect man I've fallen in love with, the one who said he didn't care about my background, had been playing me all along. But Victoria didn't know everything. She hadn't discovered what I found last week while using James's laptop. His secret Instagram account, the other engagements, the elaborate con he'd been running with different women across 3 states. You know, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. It's interesting you did a background check on me. I pulled out my phone, because I did some investigating of my own. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. Whatever you think you found. 3 engagements in the past year. I cut her off. All to women from questionable backgrounds, as you'd say. All pressured to sign similar papers. All promised huge payoffs. I pulled up the screenshots. But here's what's really interesting. The trust fund James is so desperate to access, it requires him to be married by 30. Not just engaged, not legally separated. Married, and his 30th birthday is in 7 months. The color drained from Victoria's face. How did you find out? I'm not just some scholarship student, Victoria. I'm a forensic accounting major. Numbers tell stories, and your family's numbers tell a fascinating one. I stood up, smoothing my dress. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to walk back into that party and tell everyone exactly what kind of man your perfect son really is. Unless. Victoria's hands clenched the desk. Unless what? Unless you'd like to discuss a different kind of arrangement, one that protects both your family's reputation and ensures my silence. I picked up the divorce papers and tore them in half. Shall we rejoin the party while you think it over? The look on Victoria's face almost made the last 8 months worth it. Almost. As we walked back to the party, I could hear James's voice carrying across the room, probably charming another potential victim. Victoria grabbed my arm. You wouldn't dare make a scene. I smiled, the same cold smile she'd given me countless times. Watch me. James turned as we entered, his practiced smile faltering when he saw my expression. He had no idea that his perfectly orchestrated engagement party was about to become a very different kind of social event. I grabbed a champagne glass and a spoon, ready to make an announcement that would change everything. But first, I needed to text someone. The other 3 fiancés I contacted were waiting at a nearby coffee shop, ready for my signal. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold. Sometimes it's served in front of 200 of Boston's elite, with photographic evidence and multiple witnesses. James raised his glass to make a toast, completely unaware that his entire world was about to implode. To my beautiful fiancé. I cut him off by tapping my glass. Actually, darling, I'd like to make the toast. I have quite a story to tell everyone. The crystal champagne glass trembled slightly in my hand as 200 pairs of eyes turned toward me. James's perfect smile froze, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his handsome face. Victoria stepped forward, probably to stop me, but she was too late. I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. I began, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. Especially since we're about to have not 1, but 4 engagement celebrations. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. James's father, the distinguished Judge Matthews, set down his drink, his legal mind probably already sensing the impending disaster. Honey, James started, moving toward me with that charming smile that had fooled so many women. Maybe you've had too much champagne. Actually, I'm completely sober, I replied, pulling out my phone. Unlike you last weekend in New York with Jessica, I turned to the crowd. Or was it last month in Chicago with Amanda? Or maybe 2 weeks ago in Miami with Lauren? The double doors of the ballroom swung open right on cue. 3 women walked in, each wearing an identical engagement ring to mine. I'd spent the last week coordinating this moment with them, each of us piecing together the elaborate scheme that had entangled us all. James's face went from confused to ashen in seconds. Victoria gripped her pearls so hard I thought they might snap. Judge Matthews stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. Ladies, I nodded to my fellow fiancés. Would you like to share when James proposed to each of you? Jessica, a pediatric nurse from New York, stepped forward first. 3 months ago, at the top of the Empire State Building, he said I was the only one who understood him. 4 months ago, Amanda added, her voice shaking slightly. On a private yacht in Lake Michigan, he said his family's trust fund required marriage, but he chosen me because of love. Lauren, a kindergarten teacher from Miami, completed the picture. 6 weeks ago, he said he never met anyone like me. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. James's sister dropped her champagne glass, the crystal shattering on the floor in a perfect metaphor for the moment. You see, I continued, my voice growing stronger, James here has a little problem. His trust fund requires marriage before his 30th birthday. But what his family didn't know was that he planned to marry someone, claim the money, and then have his mother pressure the bride into a quick, quiet divorce with a nice payout for silence, of course. Victoria stepped forward, her designer heels clicking against the marble. These are ridiculous accusations. Oh, I'm not finished, I cut her off. Because the really interesting part isn't just the multiple engagements, it's the money. I nodded to Amanda, who opened her laptop and connected it to the room's projector. Financial records filled the screen. Bank transfers, investment accounts, and a complex web of transactions that I'd spent weeks untangling. While James was promising forever to 4 different women, he was also moving money from his hospital's charitable foundation through a series of offshore accounts. I turned to Judge Matthews. I believe that's called embezzlement, isn't it, Your Honor? The judge's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. He'd spent decades building his reputation in Boston's legal circles, and now his son's actions threatened to destroy it all. The charity money was supposed to fund children's cancer research, Jessica added, her voice thick with disgust. That's how I met him. I was coordinating with the foundation for my pediatric patients. James finally found his voice. This is insane. You can't prove any of this. I smiled, the same confident smile he'd given me when promising we'd be together forever. Actually, I can. You see, James, you really should have Googled me before you decided to make me fiancé number 4. I'm not just some struggling scholarship student. I'm a forensic accountant specializing in financial crimes. And I'm very, very good at my job. The projector switched to screenshots of James's secret Instagram account, showing him with different women in different cities, always with the same practiced smile and rehearsed promises. And these records, I gestured to the screen, have already been sent to the hospital board, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, and the Boston Globe. They should be running the story in tomorrow's paper. Victoria stumbled backward, collapsing into a nearby chair. Her perfectly curated world was crumbling in real time, and for once her money and social connections couldn't fix it. You're done, James, Lauren said quietly. We're all done being your pawns. The room had evolved from shocked whispers to open chaos. Cell phones were out, social media already buzzing with Boston's scandal of the year. Judge Matthews was frantically making calls, probably to every lawyer he knew. Victoria had disappeared, likely retreating to process her social humiliation. James made one last desperate attempt. Olivia, please. We can work this out. Whatever they're paying you to do this. That's your problem, James. You think everything and everyone can be bought. I twisted his expensive engagement ring off my finger. But some things actually are priceless, like integrity and justice. I dropped the ring into his champagne glass, watching it sink to the bottom. By the way, the other 3 rings, they're all fakes, just like you. The sound of police sirens filtered through the mansion's windows. Perfect timing. I coordinated with the FBI to arrive just as the evidence was presented. Sometimes justice needs a dramatic stage. Ladies, I turned to my fellow almost brides. I believe that's our cue to leave. I hear there's a great bar down the street where we can toast to dodging 4 identical bullets. As we walked toward the door, Jessica paused. What about the trust fund? The whole reason he did this. I laughed, genuine amusement breaking through my composed facade. Oh, that's the best part. I found the actual trust document. There was never a marriage requirement. James' grandfather just wanted him to demonstrate responsibility and character by his 30th birthday. I'd say tonight proves he failed that test spectacularly. We left through the grand entrance, passing FBI agents on their way in. The warm summer air felt cleansing after the suffocating atmosphere of wealth and deceit inside. Behind us, Boston's elite were witnessing the downfall of their perfect golden boy, and no amount of family influence could stop what was coming. Lauren linked her arm through mine as we walked away from the chaos. So, forensic accountant, huh? Think you could help me understand my student loan statements? For the first time that evening, I felt light, free from the weight of secrets and schemes. First round of drinks is on me, ladies. I think we have some stories to share. 3 months later, I sat in a downtown Boston cafe, reading the newspaper coverage of James Matthews' sentencing. 8 years for financial fraud and embezzlement. The mighty really do fall hard when their crimes catch up to them. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Did you see Victoria Matthews is selling the mansion? Apparently, the social humiliation was too much. Attached was a real estate listing for the estate where our dramatic engagement party had unfolded. I smiled, remembering how things had played out after that night. The four of us, Jessica, Amanda, Lauren, and I, had formed an unexpected sisterhood. Weekly wine nights turned into a support group for women who'd escaped toxic relationships. We even started a consulting firm together, helping other women identify financial red flags in their relationships. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and I looked up to see Judge Matthews walking in. He'd aged a decade in 3 months, his distinguished silver hair now almost completely white. He spotted me and, after a moment's hesitation, approached my table. Miss Anderson, he said formally, his voice carrying the weight of his fallen dynasty. May I? I gestured to the empty chair across from me. He sat down, straightening his tie, a nervous habit I'd noticed during James's trial. I owe you an apology, he began, surprising me, not just for my son's actions, but for my own willful blindness. I spent so many years protecting James from consequences that I became part of the problem. I stirred my coffee slowly, considering his words. The Children's Cancer Foundation, those families deserved better. Yes, he agreed quietly. Which is why I've liquidated my retirement fund to repay every dollar James stole. The foundation will continue its work, under new leadership, of course. We sat in silence for a moment, the bustling cafe continuing around us. Victoria asked me to give you this, he finally said, placing an envelope on the table. She's getting help. Turns out enabling James wasn't her only problem. I opened the envelope to find a handwritten letter. Dear Olivia, I spent years building a perfect facade for my family, destroying anyone who threatened to crack it. In doing so, I helped create the monster my son became. Your actions, while devastating to our family, probably saved future women from the same fate. The family pearls I once said you'd never be worthy of, I've sold them. The money has been donated to a domestic violence shelter in your name. I'm learning that real strength isn't in maintaining appearances, but in facing truth. Victoria Matthews, I folded the letter carefully, tucking it away. Tell her I received it. Judge Matthews nodded, standing to leave. He paused, looking down at me. You know, the trust fund really was about demonstrating character. You showed more of it than any of us. After he left, I opened my laptop to check the latest emails for our consulting firm. A new message caught my eye from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. They wanted us to conduct training sessions for their agents on identifying relationship-based financial fraud. My phone buzzed again, this time with our group chat. Lauren just helped another woman escape a James-like situation. She's safe now. Amanda, our story saved another one. Worth everything we went through. Jessica, wine night tonight to celebrate. I'm buying. I typed back, count me in, and wait until you hear who just walked into my cafe. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just exposing the truth, it's using that truth to protect others. James had wanted to use my accounting skills to hide his crimes. Instead, those same skills had brought him down and were now helping other women protect themselves. As I gathered my things to leave, I caught my reflection in a cafe window. The scared, uncertain woman who'd once stood in Victoria's study, holding divorce papers and fighting back tears, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, and surprisingly grateful for the experience that had transformed her. My phone buzzed one final time, a news alert. Matthew's family scandal leads to new financial protection laws for engaged couples. I smiled, thinking of Victoria's pearls, now transformed into shelter and safety for women in need. Some things really are priceless, like justice, redemption, and the unshakable bonds formed in the aftermath of surviving someone else's perfect lies. The text message stared back at me from my phone screen, each word another twist of the knife. Hey mom, change of plans. Having Thanksgiving at Diane's this year. She's doing this whole traditional spread with all dad's favorites. Maybe we can do lunch that weekend. I sat at my kitchen counter, surrounded by grocery lists and recipe cards I'd pulled out for what I thought would be our usual family Thanksgiving. 25 years of hosting, of perfecting my cranberry sauce recipe, of watching my son Michael grow from a toddler who made hand turkey drawings to a man who carved the bird with his father, all erased by a single text. Diane. My ex-husband Tom's new wife of 2 years. The woman who'd been his just a colleague until I found the hotel receipts. The woman who was 15 years younger and apparently made better stuffing than me. Sure, honey. Whatever works best, I tagged back, my fingers trembling slightly. Tell your father and Diane I hope they have a wonderful holiday. The response came quickly. Thanks for understanding, Mom. You're the best. Am I? I wondered, setting down my phone. Because the best mothers probably don't feel this hollow inside when their children choose someone else. I started gathering up the recipe cards, years of Thanksgiving memories scattered across my counter. There was the sweet potato casserole recipe my grandmother had passed down, the green bean dish Michael had loved as a child, the perfect turkey basting instructions I'd finally mastered after a decade of trying. That's when I saw it, the corner of an old envelope peeking out from between the pages of my recipe binder. My heart stopped as I recognized Tom's handwriting on the front. Within minutes, I was in the attic, pulling down boxes I hadn't touched since the divorce. There, behind Christmas decorations and old photo albums, was the shoebox I'd forgotten about, the one filled with letters and cards from the early years of our marriage. My hands shook as I opened the first envelope. The letter inside was dated 15 years ago, when Tom had been working late at the office more and more frequently. My dearest, it began, but it wasn't addressed to me. As I read further, my throat tightened. This wasn't just any letter. It was part of a correspondence between Tom and Diane that had started long before I ever suspected anything. But these weren't love letters. These were business letters. Plans, strategies, discussions about the company Tom and I had built together from scratch. The one he'd managed to keep in the divorce by claiming he'd been the sole driving force behind its success. Once we implement the new structure, one letter read, we can start moving the assets. Sarah won't notice. She never checks the quarterly reports anyway. I felt sick. All those years I trusted him to handle the business side while I focused on operations and client relations. All those times he'd assured me everything was fine, that the company's struggling numbers were just market fluctuations. Another letter caught my eye, this one from just before our divorce. Everything's in place. Once the papers are signed, we can finally be together openly. Sarah will get her settlement, and she'll never know about the offshore accounts. Offshore accounts, the words seemed to pulse on the page. During our divorce, Tom had claimed the company was barely staying afloat, that the settlement he offered was more than fair. I believed him, too tired and heartbroken to fight. My phone buzzed, another text from Michael. Diane's asking if you want her cranberry sauce recipe. She won some kind of cooking contest with it. I looked at the phone, then back at the letters spread around me. My son, my own flesh and blood, was sitting in the house of a woman who had helped systematically dismantle not just my marriage, but my financial security. And they wanted to share recipes. More letters spilled from the box. Bank statements, email printouts, a whole paper trail of betrayal that had started when Michael was still in middle school. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about years of calculated deception. The last letter in the box was the most damning. Written just weeks before Tom asked for a divorce, it detailed exactly how they hidden millions in company profits, complete with account numbers and transfer dates, the kind of evidence that would interest not just a divorce lawyer, but the IRS. My hands were steady now as I picked up my phone, but instead of responding to Michael's text, I opened my camera app and started photographing the letters, one by one, building my own paper trail of truth. They wanted to take my Thanksgiving, fine, but they were about to learn that some dishes are best served cold. The week before Thanksgiving, I made 3 important calls. The first was to David Chen, my former divorce attorney, who had always suspected Tom was hiding assets. The second was to the IRS Fraud Investigation Unit. The third was to Marissa, Tom's executive assistant for the past 20 years, who had been mysteriously let go 2 months after Diane officially joined the company. I've been waiting for this call, Marissa said, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. I have files. Lots of files. 2 days later, I sat in David's office, surrounded by mountains of evidence. Marissa's files, combined with my letters, painted a picture so damning it made my divorce attorney whistle. This isn't just divorce fraud, Sarah, David said, adjusting his glasses. This is systematic tax evasion, embezzlement, and corporate fraud. Tom and Diane could be looking at serious jail time. My stomach churned. And what about the company, the employees? With these documents, we can prove you were an unknowing party. The company can be saved, but Tom and Diane, he shook his head. They're going to have a very different kind of Thanksgiving than they planned. I thought about Michael, about how this would affect him. He'd idolized his father, and finding out the truth would devastate him. But keeping quiet meant being complicit in their deception. My phone buzzed, another text from Diane. Just checking if you got my cranberry sauce recipe. Also, Michael mentioned you seemed a bit down about the Thanksgiving changes. We'd love to have you join us. Around 4 p.m. The audacity was breathtaking. I could picture her in my old kitchen, playing happy families with my ex-husband and my son, probably wearing one of those ridiculous designer aprons she was known for. Thank you for the invitation, I replied. Actually, I would love to come. David looked up sharply. Sarah, whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking it's time for truth to be served alongside the turkey, I said, gathering the documents. Can you have everything ready by Thursday? He nodded slowly. The IRS agents can be there within minutes if needed. But are you sure you want to do it this way? I wasn't sure of anything except that I couldn't let another holiday pass with this weight on my conscience. Michael deserved to know who his father and his stepmother really were. Thanksgiving Day arrived crisp and clear. I dressed carefully in the suit I used to wear to board meetings, back when I thought I was an equal partner in the company I helped build. In my briefcase were copies of every damning document, including photographs of the original letters. The drive to my old house was surreal. Diane had redecorated, of course. The elegant fall wreaths I used to make had been replaced by generic store-bought decorations. The garden I lovingly tended was now manicured into sterile perfection. Michael met me at the door, giving me a quick hug that smelled of his father's expensive cologne. Mom, you look different. Good different or bad different? I managed a smile. Just professional. I thought this was casual. Oh, I always dress up for important occasions, I said, following him inside. The house had changed even more on the inside. All traces of my 25 years there had been erased, replaced by Diane's modern and personal style. The only familiar thing was the smell of turkey, though even that seemed wrong somehow. Sarah, Diane's voice was honey-sweet as she emerged from the kitchen, wearing a pristine white apron that probably cost more than my entire outfit. We're so glad you could join us. Tom's just opening wine. My ex-husband appeared from the dining room, crystal wine glass in hand. He'd aged well, Dan him, his gray hair making him look distinguished rather than old. Sarah, this is unexpected. Is it? I set my briefcase down carefully. I thought families should be together on Thanksgiving. An uncomfortable silence fell. Michael looked between us, sensing the tension but not understanding its source. Well, Diane clapped her hands brightly. Dinner's almost ready. Sarah, would you like the grand tour? I've made some changes since you were last here. Actually, I said, reaching for my briefcase, I brought something I'd like to share first. Consider it my contribution to the meal. Tom's face changed subtly. He'd seen that expression on my face before, in board meetings when I was about to present something he wouldn't like. Mom, Michael asked, what's going on? I opened my briefcase slowly, deliberately. Honey, do you remember when you were 14 and Dad started missing your baseball games because of work emergencies? Tom stepped forward. Sarah, don't. It's funny. I continued, pulling out the first stack of documents. But according to these bank records, those emergencies usually involved 5-star hotels and jewelry store purchases. Diane's perfect smile faltered. I don't think this is appropriate dinner conversation. No, I spread the papers on the coffee table. Then perhaps we should discuss offshore accounts, tax evasion, or how about corporate fraud? Michael moved closer, picking up one of the letters. His face went pale as he read. Son, Tom started, but Michael cut him off. This is your handwriting, Dad. These dates. This was during my high school graduation. I pulled out more documents. There's more, so much more. Would you like to see the part where they plan to cheat me out of my share of the company? Or maybe the evidence of systematic embezzlement? That's enough. Tom's voice boomed through the room. Michael, your mother is clearly bitter about the divorce. Bitter? I laughed, and the sound surprised even me. I was bitter when I thought you just had an affair. This, I gestured to the spreading pile of evidence. This is criminal, and the IRS agents parked outside agree. The color drained from both Tom and Diane's faces. Through the window, we could see two black SUVs pulling up to the curb. Mom? Michael's voice was small, like when he was a child waking from a nightmare. Did you know about this, all this time? No, honey, I just found out, and I had to decide whether to keep quiet for the sake of peace or show you the truth about the father you idolize and the woman who helped him betray us both. The doorbell rang. Tom and Diane stood frozen, their perfect Thanksgiving imploding around them. I'll get it, I said, picking up my briefcase. Oh, and Diane? You can keep your cranberry sauce recipe. I prefer my dishes to served with a side of justice. The aftermath of that Thanksgiving unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance of consequences. The IRS agents were professional and efficient, their badges glinting under the crystal chandelier Diane had installed to replace my mother's antique light fixture. They led Tom and Diane away just as the turkey timer chimed its cruel irony. Michael and I sat in the ruins of the abandoned dinner, the perfectly set table a monument to shattered illusions. The cranberry sauce congealed in its crystal bowl, untouched. All those business trips, he said quietly, pushing mashed potatoes around his plate. All those times he said he was working late to secure our future. He was securing something, I replied, just not what we thought. The following weeks brought a tsunami of revelations. The company's board of directors held emergency meetings. Old employees came forward with more evidence. Marissa testified about years of doctored books and suspicious wire transfers. The scandal made local headlines, then national ones. Tom and Diane took plea deals. My ex-husband would serve 5 years, his younger wife 3. The offshore accounts were frozen, their assets seized. The company I'd helped build teetered on the brink of collapse until I stepped back in, armed with both legal authority and 2 decades of operational knowledge. Why didn't you expose them sooner? Michael asked one evening as we sorted through boxes of company documents in my dining room. Why wait until Thanksgiving? I set down the file I was reviewing. Because some lessons need to be learned at the family table. Your father spent years serving up lies. It was fitting that truth became the final course. Christmas approached, and with it came change. The company stabilized under new leadership. Mine. Michael, after some soul-searching, decided to join the business, but this time with full transparency and quarterly audits. The last piece of mail I received from prison was a letter from Diane. Inside was her famous cranberry sauce recipe, along with a note. I really did win a cooking contest with this. It was the only truth I told. I pinned the recipe to my bulletin board, not to use it, but as a reminder that sometimes the prettiest packages contain the sorest truths. The following Thanksgiving, Michael and I hosted a different kind of dinner. We invited the company employees who'd lost bonuses due to Tom's fraud, the accountants who'd helped uncover the scheme, and Marissa, who'd been reinstated with a promotion. As I watched my son carve the turkey, I realized that sometimes losing a false family makes room for a real one to grow. The cranberry sauce was my grandmother's recipe, tart and sweet and honest. Mom, Michael said, raising his glass, I'd like to make a toast. The room quieted. To truth at the table, he said, and to the strongest woman I know, who taught me that real family isn't about keeping up appearances, it's about keeping up principles. I looked around our mismatched family of survivors and truth-tellers and felt truly thankful for the first time in years. Later that night, as I was cleaning up, I found a new text message from an unknown number. Tom's prison account. The food here is terrible. Happy Thanksgiving. I smiled, deleted the message without responding, and went back to my kitchen, where the leftover turkey sandwiches were a tradition I'd never let anyone steal again. Some people say revenge is a dish best served cold. But I've learned it's best served with truth, justice, and yes, homemade cranberry sauce. Just don't ask me for the recipe. Unlike some people, I prefer to keep my secrets legal. The dust particles danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window of James's study. 6 months after his fatal heart attack, I still couldn't bring myself to call it my study, even though the lawyer said everything in the house was now mine, including the secrets, apparently. I ran my finger along his mahogany desk, leaving a clean trail through the dust. Emma used to sit here as a little girl, watching her father work with those adoring eyes. Daddy's girl, everyone called her. Now, at 26, she wouldn't even take my calls. The wedding had been the breaking point, that perfect June day when everything fell apart, though I still didn't understand why. Emma had been radiant in her white dress, until the moment she saw me standing next to her father's empty chair in the front row. Her face had transformed into something I'd never seen before, pure hatred. "How dare you sit there?" she hissed during the reception. That was Dad's place. "Emma, sweetheart, he would have wanted." "Don't tell me what he would have wanted." She'd thrown her champagne glass, missing my head by inches. "You never understood him." "Never." Those were the last words my daughter spoke to me. The next day, my number was blocked, and her new husband, Ryan, informed me they'd be taking their honeymoon early. They hadn't returned to the city since. Now, surrounded by James's things, I finally forced myself to begin the task of cleaning out his study. The lawyer needed documentation for the estate, and I couldn't put it off any longer. The first drawer held the expected items: pens, paper clips, sticky notes with his messy handwriting. The second contained files related to his investment firm, all meticulously labeled. James had always been organized, almost obsessively so. It was the third drawer that made me pause. Inside was a single silver picture frame, face down. I recognized it immediately, the matching mate to the one that had sat on his desk for 20 years, showing Emma at her high school graduation. But this frame had been hidden away, and when I turned it over, my breath caught. The photo showed James with a woman I'd never seen before, both of them younger, maybe in their early 30s. They were laughing at something off camera, his arm around her waist in a way that seemed far too intimate. The date stamp in the corner read 1999, the year James had taken that 3-month business trip to London. My hands trembled as I examined the frame more closely. Something about its weight felt off. I turned it over and noticed the backing was slightly loose. When I pried it open, a small USB drive fell into my lap. For several long minutes, I just stared at it. 28 years of marriage, and I thought I'd known everything about James. He'd been the perfect husband, the perfect father, Emma's hero, my rock. My laptop whirred to life, its fan stirring the dust on the desk. The USB drive contained a single folder labeled for Emma, when ready. Inside were dozens of files, letters, photos, bank statements, and a video file dated 2 weeks before his death. I clicked play. James's face filled the screen, looking tired but determined. He was sitting in this very study in the leather chair I was now occupying. "Emma, my darling girl," he began, and my heart clenched at the familiar warmth in his voice. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone. And it's finally time for you to know the truth. The truth about everything, about Claire, about the money, and about why I've spent the last 20 years trying to make up for what I did." He ran a hand through his silver hair, a gesture so familiar it hurt. "I've lived with this guilt for too long, protected by your mother's silence." Yes, she knew. She's known since that summer in London, though we never spoke of it. She chose to forgive me to keep our family together. "For you." My mind reeled. What was he talking about? I'd never known about any Claire, never suspected anything about that London trip. "Claire was my first love," James continued. "We were engaged before I met your mother. When Claire reappeared in my life in '99, pregnant with my child, your half-sister, I made choices I'm not proud of. I emptied our savings account, nearly bankrupted us trying to keep both families afloat. Your mother discovered everything, but instead of exposing me, she helped me fix it. She's the one who saved the company, saved our reputation. Saved me." The room spun around me. A half-sister? Company savings? I had never known about any of this. But then memory after memory began clicking into place. The mysterious financial troubles that year, the way James had become almost desperately devoted to Emma afterward, the unsigned birthday cards that arrived every year until they suddenly stopped 5 years ago. "I've set up a trust fund," James was saying on screen. "For both my daughters. Your mother knows nothing about this money. It's from my personal accounts, earned after I swore to be a better man. Claire died last year, and her daughter, your sister Sarah, deserves to know her family. The full truth is in these files, along with contact information and legal documents. What you do with this information is up to you." He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes filling with tears. "But Emma, my precious girl, please don't blame your mother for keeping this secret. Everything she did, every silence she endured, was to protect you. She's a far better person than I ever was." The video ended, leaving me in a silence so profound I could hear my own heartbeat. With shaking hands, I opened another file, recent photos of a young woman who had James's eyes and Emma's smile. Now I understood Emma's fury at the wedding. She must have found this drive, watched this confession, and assumed I'd known everything all along. She thought I'd helped hide her sister from her. But James had been wrong about one thing I hadn't known. Not about Claire, not about Sarah, not about any of it. He created a fiction of my noble silence to ease his own guilt, never imagining that his last confession would destroy the very thing he'd spent 20 years trying to protect, the relationship between mother and daughter. I reached for my phone, then stopped. Emma still had me blocked, but as I looked at the photo of the half-sister she'd never known, I realized there might be another way to reach my daughter. Sometimes healing can only begin when the last lie is exposed, even if it's a lie meant to protect. The first thing I did after finding the letters was call Barbara Chen, my old friend who happened to be a forensic accountant. We'd lost touch after the divorce, another casualty of Tom's careful social engineering. But she picked up on the first ring. "Sarah," she said, "I've been waiting 3 years for this call." 2 hours later, I sat in her home office, watching as she methodically went through each document. Her face grew increasingly grim as she pieced together the financial puzzle Tom and Diane had constructed. "This is impressive," she finally said, but not in a complimentary way. "They've been planning this since before you even knew who Diane was. The company's quarterly reports, the offshore accounts, the systematic transfer of assets, it's all here." I felt sick. "How much?" "Based on these numbers," Barbara tapped her calculator, "they've hidden at least $12 million. Maybe more." 12 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. During the divorce, Tom had claimed the company was worth barely $2 million, and I'd walked away with a settlement of less than half that. "What they've done isn't just morally wrong," Barbara continued, "it's criminal. Tax evasion, fraud, embezzlement, we're talking serious federal charges." My phone buzzed, another text from Michael. "Mom, Diane wants to know if you have any food allergies. She's planning this amazing heritage turkey recipe." Heritage turkey. Of course. Everything about Diane had to be premium, superior, special. Even her betrayal was expertly crafted. "What do you want to do?" Barbara asked quietly. I looked at the scattered evidence of my ex-husband's duplicity, then at my son's innocent text. "I want justice," I said slowly, "but I need to be smart about this. Michael deserves to know the truth, but not in a way that destroys him." Barbara nodded, already reaching for her phone. "I know some people. We can have everything documented and verified within a week, just in time for your Thanksgiving dinner." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Barbara introduced me to James Martinez, a former IRS investigator turned private forensic specialist. He took one look at the letters and immediately started building a case. "They got sloppy," he said, pointing to a series of transactions. "They were so focused on hiding money from you that they left a clear trail for anyone who knew where to look." Meanwhile, Diane kept texting, each message more saccharine than the last. "Sarah, darling, I found these gorgeous vintage placemats that would look perfect with my grandmother's china. You'll love them." My grandmother's china. I wanted to scream. The set Tom had accidentally broken during the move, only for me to discover later it had been relocated to their new house. Then came the text that nearly broke me. "Michael's so excited to start new family traditions. Tom says you'll absolutely love what we've done with the dining room. Completely transformed it from what it used to be." What it used to be was my heart and soul, 25 years of memories and love poured into every detail. Now it was just another asset they'd stolen. By Tuesday we had everything in place. Barbara had compiled a comprehensive report of their financial misdeeds. James had documented every fraudulent transaction. And I had something even more valuable. I had their arrogance. "They'll never expect you to show up with evidence. James explained during our final meeting. People like this, they think they're untouchable. They believe their own lies so completely that they can't imagine being caught. I thought about all the little lies that had led to this moment, the late meetings that smelled of expensive perfume, the business trips that coincided with Diane's suspicious absences from her own job, the way company profits had mysteriously dwindled just as Tom started wearing designer suits and driving luxury cars. What about Michael? I asked. How do I protect him from this? Barbara placed her hand over mine. By showing him the truth before someone else does. Better he learns it from his mother who loves him than from a news report or a federal indictment. My phone chimed again, this time with a group text from Diane to the entire family. Can't wait to start our new holiday traditions together. Sarah, we've set you a special place at the table. After all, you're still family. I looked at the message, then at the mountain of evidence before me. Family. The word had meant everything to me once. Now it was just another tool in their arsenal of manipulation. Okay, I said, straightening my spine. Let's give them a Thanksgiving they'll never forget. James began organizing the documents into clear, chronological order. The IRS team will be on standby. One call from you, and they'll move in. And I've alerted the company's board, Barbara added. They're ready to take emergency action as soon as the evidence is presented. I picked up my phone and typed a response to Diane's text. Looking forward to it. And yes, I'd love to bring something to dinner. After all, what's Thanksgiving without a few surprises? The reply came instantly. Wonderful. Though I've got all the traditional dishes covered. Maybe just bring yourself. If she only knew what I was really bringing to the table. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I thought about Michael. About the look that would be on his face when he learned the truth about his father. About Diane. About the company he'd always assumed he'd inherit one day. But I also thought about justice. About truth. About the responsibility we have to expose darkness, even when it hurts the people we love. Tomorrow, I would start preparing my own special dish for Thanksgiving. The main ingredients, years of lies, a dash of karma, and enough evidence to serve them all exactly what they deserved. Thanksgiving Day arrived with a bitter wind and threatening clouds, nature itself seeming to understand the storm that was about to break. I dressed carefully in a black suit that I'd bought with my meager divorce settlement, my documentation organized in a sleek leather briefcase. The drive to my old home felt like entering enemy territory. Holiday decorations mocked me from the perfectly manicured lawn, decorations that had once been mine, now arranged with Diane's artificial precision. Michael opened the door, his smile genuine but nervous. Mom, you look different. Different good or different bad. Just serious. He hugged me, and for a moment I almost lost my resolve. Then I caught a glimpse of Diane in the background, wearing my mother's antique apron while stirring something in my grandmother's serving bowl. The house smelled of turkey and betrayal. Everything had been redecorated, sanitized of my existence, yet they kept the valuable pieces of my family history as their own. The dining room table, my parents' wedding gift to us, was set with elaborate precision. Sarah, Diane's voice dripped honey. We saved you a special seat. Yes, at the far end of the table, away from my son, away from the head where Tom sat smugly in his designer sweater, the perfect picture of the family they'd stolen from me. Before we sit, I said, placing my briefcase on the table, I have something to share. Mom? Michael's voice held a warning. It's a family tradition, I continued, meeting Tom's suddenly wary eyes, to express what we're thankful for. I'm thankful for evidence, for forensic accountants, and for the IRS agents who are currently surrounding this house. The color drained from Tom's face. Diane dropped a serving spoon with a clatter. What are you talking about? Michael asked. I opened my briefcase slowly, deliberately. I'm talking about $12 million in hidden assets, about systematic fraud, about the truth your father and his wife have been hiding. Sarah, don't. Tom started to rise. Sit down, I said quietly, unless you want the agents outside to come in early. For the next 15 minutes, I laid out the evidence, bank statements, transfer records, Diane's early involvement, the offshore accounts. With each document, Michael's face grew paler, his hands shaking as he recognized his father's signatures, Diane's meticulous notes. All this time, he whispered, while Mom could barely afford her apartment. We were protecting you, Diane tried, but Michael cut her off. By stealing from my mother? By lying to everyone? The doorbell rang. Tom and Diane froze like statues. That would be the federal agents, I said, gathering my documents. They're very interested in having their own dinner conversation with you both. What followed was a blur of badges, handcuffs, and Miranda rights. As Tom and Diane were led away, I heard her whisper, "The turkey's going to burn." "Let it," Michael said, his voice hard. It was never about the turkey, was it? Later that evening, Michael and I sat in my small apartment, eating delivery pizza, a new Thanksgiving tradition born from the ashes of the old. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked. "I needed proof, and you needed to see who they really were without my influence." He nodded, understanding finally replacing the hurt in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it." "You have nothing to be sorry for," I said, reaching for his hand. "But we have a lot to be thankful for tonight." "Like what?" "Like truth, justice, and the fact that your father and Diane will be eating prison turkey next Thanksgiving." Michael actually smiled. "And the company?" "The board has asked me to step in as interim CEO. Apparently, they appreciate executives who don't commit federal crimes." We stayed up late that night, talking, healing, planning. Outside, the bitter wind had died down, and the threatening clouds had finally broken, making way for stars. Sometimes I realized we have to lose the false comfort of lies to find the genuine warmth of truth. And while revenge might be a dish best served cold, justice, like love, is best served with courage, strength, and, if necessary, a side of delivery pizza.